So innovation is really part of how we see ourselves. It is within our DNA, and it's how we define success as an organization. My name is Mark Fafard, and I have responsibility for global payroll, international assignment services, and time and labor management with Raytheon Technologies. My first paycheck was actually from my father's company. He had a construction company, and I started working for them when I was, my goodness, I was probably 12 years old. My brother and I, it was a flooring construction company, and we had organized all these samples, and I think we each got something like $10, right? So that was, but we got it in the form of a paycheck, which I'm pretty sure I still have framed somewhere for what it's worth. We ended up going camping that weekend, and we bought a massive amount of candy. We did not save a single penny. There was no 401k involved. We bought a massive amount of candy, and we ate the entire thing sitting in front of the fire that night, and I'm pretty sure we both felt ill the next day. My first exposure to Raytheon was actually when I was about 6 years old, and my grandfather, who was an engineer and an inventor for Pratt & Whitney, one of our business units, took me with him when he used to take groups of Boy Scouts on tours of the shop floor. And I remember looking up and seeing these engines that were just larger than life, and so that was my first exposure. My grandfather started as an engineer after he came out of the service, and ended up working his way up to foreman. And he had a number of inventions that were patented that went into how Pratt & Whitney just overall improved, I should say, the engines of the day. And it was something that I always emulated personally, wanting to have that type of an impact. I started my career with Deloitte, splitting my time between corporate income tax and global compensation and benefits practice. And I had the opportunity to prepare the Raytheon corporate income tax returns. So that was my first real exposure, more with Raytheon as a client. When I initially joined Raytheon back in 2007, I came into a tax planning position and was initially tasked with getting a state of the state, if you will, on our overall payroll tax compliance, planning, and audit activities. And our model at that point in time was, I would say, very highly leveraged, overly outsourced, and at that point in time, we didn't have the right balance in internal structure really governing that activity. Raytheon has about 180,000 employees all around the world. Our presence is in about 50 countries where we currently provide our services. Raytheon's comprised of 4 different business units. We have Pratt & Whitney that makes jet engines. We have Collins that makes pretty much everything else in a plane. We have Raytheon Missiles and Defense. And then we have Raytheon Intelligence and Space. What people may not be as familiar with is that we actually invented the microwave and initially put it into commercial production. Microwave technology is a key aspect of a number of the products and services that we offer, it's really interesting to see the different applications there. After I was with Raytheon for roughly 3 or 4 years in that tax planning role, we went through a reorganization, and we took the payroll tax team up into our shared services organization and brought it together with payroll, which was the perfect journey for us. And it was where I first had the opportunity to fully take over and really provide leadership for that end-to-end process. Early on in that journey, I remember the first time I went to visit our payroll provider, and I went into our payroll operations shop to put eyes on the payroll cycle and the payroll process. And I remember seeing stacks of payroll registers that were higher than my head. And I realized, we had about 100 different payrolls in the US that we were running. And we had all of these payroll registers that were printed out and that were manually reconciled with pencils to even identify where we perhaps had a difference from what our expectations were, right? And it just blew my mind. And with all of that time spent on just getting to identify the difference, there wasn't any time in that cycle to explain why and figure out if it was right or wrong. The payroll was released and we moved on. And so that really started our formal journey to look for a better way, to find enabling technologies to automate and compress the time it takes us to identify, to do that reconciliation and identify those variances so that we can really spend our people time on determining, why do we have a variance? Does it make sense? Is there something else that we need to do? At the time, we benchmarked the major BPO providers in the market. We talked to a number of other large companies to get a sense for what they were doing. And the only provider that we found that was really effectively leveraging technology in this space was actually ADP's BPO full service payroll outsourcing arm. And so they were using business process management technology to really encapsulate that whole end-to-end process and automate those activities and controls. And so that started us on that journey of rethinking the end-to-end payroll process and leveraging a combination of low-code technology with robotics to automate that entire set of controls end-to-end and to enable us to refocus our talent on the high value add tasks around determining if we have a challenge or not and if the data makes sense. I'd say probably around 2012, give or take, we formally launched the global expansion of our relationship with ADP. And we started down the path of going from what was over 99 different payroll solutions at the time in our top 20 countries and implementing one consistent global solution and set of processes for the company. And that was the first aspect of our global journey that we completed a few years back. And since that point, we've gone through a commercial spin where we separated out Otis Elevators and Carrier Air Conditioners to be their own publicly traded companies and take flight. And we've also merged the aerospace part of our business that was Heritage UTC with Raytheon and formed this awesome aerospace and defense company that's really who we are today. So I remember not long after I joined Raytheon Technologies, and we had gone through an assessment of all of the different opportunities that we had and really prioritized where we needed to focus. One of those areas that really rose to the top was the IRS requirement to remit taxes that are withheld from equity compensation within 24 hours of that exercise or vesting activity. And it wasn't something that Raytheon at the time had a process to address. And I remember as we looked at the different options, our payroll cycle from start to finish was about 2 to 3 days. So we really didn't have the ability to run payrolls on a daily basis and actually meet that requirement. And so I remember I was sitting by my pool and in my backyard, and I had my laptop out, and I think my son was swimming at the time. And I was fooling around on the ADP website. And I remember seeing that there was a particular page for ADP standalone tax services. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And so I had clicked on it, and I saw that there was what looked like a portal, the ability to enter activity at the company level. And I took a step back because the prior challenge that we had was all of that activity had to come in through a payroll at the employee level and go through that whole payroll cycle, that whole process, to go downstream and have the taxes remitted to the government. And as I was looking at ADP's standalone tax engine, the light bulb turned on, and I said, you know what? If we could partner with ADP on this, they already have the tools to connect a company level input without running a payroll with the activity that's normally coming through, and we could have a way to remit these taxes on a daily basis without needing to run through that daily production process. And so that really turned into our first major collaboration between ADP and Raytheon, and ultimately solved what for us was a $20 million a year tax exposure, and turned into what was the first patent application that we had filed for an innovation within the payroll and tax organization. And it was a reflection point for me. It was also a personal achievement in that it enabled me to really check that box on my personal career goals and objectives, looking back at my grandfather and the inventions that he had for Pratt, and the ability to say, hey, here's where I added value as well. So that was a proud moment. One of the more recent innovations, and it's a great area that we've partnered with ADP, along with a number of our other partners, is really to take our U.S. payroll end to end and encapsulate it in a low-code application, and then look at automating those activities with robotics, and that we've effectively reduced our payroll footprint executing those payrolls by over 30%. We've significantly compressed that cycle time, and we're now starting to refocus on what do we do with the capacity that we have? How do we focus that on higher value add functions, and how do we start to help that data tell the story as we go forward? But it's an area where I think now we're also looking to partner with ADP in our global payroll operating models around the world and take that same approach as we look at the different solutions that we leverage. Again, really looking at what is the end-to-end process and what is possible in that space. I would tell you the way I typically measure success is if I see smiles on faces when people are coming off the elevator in the morning. If people are excited to come into the office and they're looking forward to pushing the boundaries and taking risks and rethinking how we do what we do, like that is how I would define success. Again, duly focused with execution. So if I think about the last few years of our payroll journey at Raytheon, change has really been the one constant, right? So if I think back to 2017, that was really when we started on this round of our journey, going towards the acquisition of a company called Rockwell Collins. There was about 25,000 employees that were on two completely different HR and payroll solutions, and we had to take that organization and bring them into the fold, integrate them from a technology, a people, and a process standpoint within 4 months of when that deal closed. Which prior to that, I would say an acquisition of that size and complexity, 12 months probably would have been a stretch. Coming out of that integration that we had completed in about 4 months, that we pivoted very quickly into the tax-free spin of Otis and Carrier, standing them up globally with ADP in all countries. So basically taking one solution and turning it into 3 self-sustaining solutions with payroll organizations in about 9 months from start to finish. And on the same day we turned those lights on, we then merged the aerospace aspect of what was Heritage UTC with Raytheon to form the new Raytheon Technologies company. And that's actually going live in about 2 weeks from today. We're going to be turning on the lights in all of the major countries around the world that we have a presence with ADP in bringing both Heritage UTC Aerospace and Raytheon into the Raytheon Technologies Payroll Solutions.